What's up, everybody? This is Sea Launch Sports that you're listening to. I'm Kennedy Curley. Hayden Klinkhammer is on the other side of the camera. We haven't been on in about a week. There's been a lot that's gone on in about a week. Dropped his album. The women's team just won the World Cup. Stranger Things Season 3 has come out.
Oh, yes.
There's been a lot. 4th of July, just naturally Independence Day. There's been a lot of things that have gone on, but one of the biggest things has also been that Kawhi Leonard decided that he was going to go to the Los Angeles Clippers. Paul George is getting traded with him. And now, for the most part, we know generally what the Western Conference lineups are going to look like. Thanks to Kawhi, he took his sweet little time. And other than maybe like a big trade with Russell Westbrook or any other big trades that might happen this offseason, we pretty much know what these teams are going to look like. So, with that being said, to start things off, we would like to go ahead and do our Western Conference and Eastern Conference predictions for the playoffs. Hey, like you start.
Yes.
Yeah, start. Okay. We'll do it one conference at a time. So we could start. I don't know. Do you care about East, West? Let's save the best for last. Let's go with West second, East first.
Starting with 8 or starting with 1?
Start with 8. Let's go with 8.
Okay. All right. So, at number 8, I have the Orlando Magic. I was back and forth between them and Detroit, but I think either way, that 8 seed in the East is going to be, below 500. Not exactly the most talented, but I say that, but then the Magic actually went up 1-0 on the Raptors, which is crazy to say, but that was strange. So yeah, that's kind of whichever team in the East sucks the least. I just kind of put that in there. At 7, I have the Chicago Bulls.
Okay.
Just based on the fact that they finally have what I think is going to be a decent point guard or above average point guard. Definitely offensively. That team offensively should be relatively potent. But then again, the East, if they were in the West, I wouldn't pick them, obviously, to make the playoffs. But because the East, especially really outside of maybe the top 3 or 4, there's a big talent gap, I would say. So I have them at 7. Just based off of kind of like the Magic, but, offensively at least, they're talented offensively. They're young guys. They got shooters. Kobe White's going to come in and be able to run their offense. At 6. Now, this is subject to change, whether, we're going to talk about this later, but the whole Russell Westbrook type scenario. But I have the Heat at 6. Again, Jimmy Butler is now a member of the Miami Heat. You go into, again, the bottom half of that conference is very I just don't see a lot of other teams sneaking in, and the Heat at the very least will have a superstar in Jimmy Butler. So I could see them, just based off the fact that I think Eric Spoelstra is a better coach than a lot of times people talk about. And, yes, they gave up Josh Richardson, who was one of their better two-way guys, but they basically just traded him for an upgraded version of Jimmy Butler. So I have them getting in at 6. At 5, I have the Indiana Pacers. Obviously Oladipo will be coming back from being injured. Miles Turner hopefully will continue to take more and more steps forward. Obviously the addition of our boy Malcolm Brogdon is big. That's someone else that can at least generate offense outside of Oladipo. They still got Sabonis. So yeah, I have them just based off of even last year, what they did last year. Even when they didn't have Oladipo, obviously they didn't have Brogdon. I have them sliding in at 5. At 4, I have Toronto, even though they lost Kawhi. I still think they have a lot of talent. Maybe not superstar talent, but they have a lot of very good players on that team. Again, the East is at the very least top heavy. So I have Toronto at 4. At 3, I have Philly. Obviously, they're going to have to figure out their fit really on offense, but at the very least defensively, I would imagine that they're among the top 5 defensive teams in the NBA. Obviously, Ben Simmons is a great defender. Joel Embiid's a pretty good defender. Al Horford has always been a smart defender. Josh Richardson, who's like their big return in the Jimmy Butler trade, is a very good two-way player. Tobias Harris, we talked about as being one of the more underrated guys. So yeah, I have them at 3 based off of even just defense alone. I think that puts them above everyone else, at least in the East. At 2, I actually have Boston. And obviously this could crash and burn in my face, but I'm going to say that Kemba fits in with not only Brad Stevens' system better, but along with the other guys who also want touches and want the ball. And again, I think they favor from being in a much, much weaker conference. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Kemba finally has guys that can help him take off the load, and that helps his efficiency rise and maybe even shows him to put more effort on the defensive side, which we saw even happen with Kyrie when he first got to Boston. His defensive, at least, effort picked up under Brad Stevens. I have Jason Tatum kind of going back to maybe not as efficiently, but somewhere close to his rookie season, and hopefully he continues to take steps forward to learn to do other things as well, like play make and play off the ball, and some of the things that we addressed or that we talked about when talking about why he wasn't a good number 2 or 3. I still kind of believe in Gordon Hayward, at the very least as a solid player. And again, we talked about how people continue to give Brad Stevens, or they tend to put him in this level that he doesn't necessarily deserve, but we talked about how he seems to do more with less. So I think no Al Horford, no Kyrie. He's going to have to come up with some sort of way to get them to kind of buy in. And I do think he is good at that. And then obviously number 1, I have Milwaukee. Yes, they lost Brogdon. That will hurt. But also at the same time, Giannis is still not even in his prime. Chris Middleton, they re-signed. Brook Lopez, they re-signed. You know, so yeah, I don't know if there's much to really go into much about them. We kind of talked about them a lot already. So I have them at 1.
Cool. I have similarities on your list. I will say, did you have Detroit as your number 8?
Orlando.
Orlando, okay. Well, my number 8 is Detroit.
So yeah, I was back and forth between them and Orlando. Yeah.
I thought about Orlando for a second, but I do think that there are teams. I don't think that they really got much better at the places that they need to get better. So they got Al-Farouq Aminu, who is good. He was good for the Trailblazers, but you already have Aaron Gordon. Man. You already have Vucevic. You already have, Mo Bamba. You already have guys at the power forward center position. So I guess he could come off the bench and play power forward, or if you really want, you could put Gordon at 3. But I just think that the Magic kind of have a lot of similar players.
Oh yeah,
guys who can't shoot but they can score in the paint, or they can defend, and that's what kind of Al-Farouq Aminu is a specialty defensive player who can start and give you enough minutes there. Occasionally hit the 3, but overall he's not super great at the 3-point shooting. So I gave my upper edge to Detroit because I liked the Derrick Rose signing enough to at least put them in the playoffs. I don't think it's going to put them over the top, but you still have Blake Griffin. Andre Drummond is one of the best rebounders that we've seen in the last decade, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And, they made it to the playoffs last season, and, you still have Reggie Jackson. I don't think he's a beast or anything, but I think that those 4 right there are good enough to put you in the playoffs at an 8 seed. I think that they're a little bit better than the Magic, and I actually, dare I say, think that the Knicks could be in conversation for one of those bottom seed teams in the playoffs. We'll get into that maybe a little later. I don't know if I'll talk about that, but they're in the conversation. But I have Detroit. I think that Derrick Rose was probably a better acquisition for them than any of those other fringe teams. So my number 8 is Detroit. My number 7 team is the Nets. I don't think that they're a top-tier team yet. Mm-hmm. They got Kevin Durant, but he's not probably going to play all season. They got Kyrie Irving. I think that keeps them about as good as they were last season. Actually, I put them a little bit better because he is better than D'Angelo Russell. Still have Dinwiddie. You still have Joe Harris. You still have Karis LeVert. You brought in DeAndre Jordan. You still have Jared Allen. So I think that team is playoff caliber. You have enough shooters on that team. And I think that Kyrie can kind of hold the fort down for one season until Kevin Durant gets back in another. But I don't think they have enough star power yet, or really just offensive ability just yet. With 2 of the 3 best players on that team are Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could say Spencer Dinwiddie, but that's not a lot of offense there. You're going to have to ask a lot of Kyrie Irving. So I have them at 7. Number 6, I agree with you. I have the Heat. Mm-hmm. The Heat. I didn't love the Heat, but I didn't love the acquisition of Jimmy Butler a lot. I mean, I think it gets them in the playoffs because he's really good.
Yeah.
I think he's a solid number 1. I don't think he's a great number 1, but he's a number 1 that is capable of leading an Eastern Conference team to the playoffs, and I think that's exactly what you're going to get.
Exactly.
Goran Dragic is still on that team.
Yeah.
Adebayo is a player on that. Bam, he's on that team. They just got Mo Harkless and what was his name?
Myers
Leonard. That was who it was. And so they've upgraded their depth a little bit. Kelly Olynyk is on the team. I don't love Kelly Olynyk, but he has a role on solid teams, and he can still shoot the ball, stretch things out, provide minutes off the bench. And so I think that team got better this offseason. Jimmy Butler was the primary guy that they got, and who knows, as you said, there's an asterisk next to the Heat, because if they can pull off a trade for Russell Westbrook, then we might be talking about them as a top 4 team in the East. Mm-hmm. Although the fit might be a little bit weird, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Still enough talent on that team. So they're my number 6. The Raptors are my number 5. I think losing Kawhi Leonard is hard, but I also agree with you. I think that you still have Marc Gasol, who's a solid player. Serge Ibaka's there. Pascal Siakam is still there. Kyle Lowry will probably get more touches this season, and who knows, maybe he'll even be an all-star this season like he was in prior seasons. He's a 5-time all-star, and so with the ball out of Kawhi Leonard's hands and maybe more in his, we could see him return to that. He was already pretty good last season, so I think that the Raptors have enough depth still, and they have enough all-around talent. Maybe no one great, but certainly enough good pieces to be a top 5 team in the East, and I have them right at number 5. Number 4, I debated on actually putting them at number 3, but I have them at number 4, the Pacers. I really do like the Pacers. That team has a lot of really good defensive talent.
Oh,
Got
yeah.
Oladipo, who everyone knows is a great defender.
Yeah.
He could defend the 1 or the 2. You've got Malcolm Brogdon, who's also a really good defender, and he's an efficient offensive player. So you have those two at your 1 and 2. I think Malcolm Brogdon will probably play 1, but both are really good defenders. Both are solid offensive players. Brogdon is very, very efficient. Both can shoot the 3. You just got T.J. Warren, who's coming off the bench. You also got Jeremy Lamb, so there's a little bit of depth on that wing. Miles Turner, you and I are both a big fan of his. He's a great defender. Sabonis is on that team, and I'm pretty sure I would qualify him as a good defender, definitely a good rebounder at least.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that team to me is really impressive, and they were already, I wouldn't say a contender, but they were kind of a sleeper East team last year until Oladipo got hurt. Now you add Brogdon to that equation, and I think that I could see them being the number 3 team, but I don't have them number 3. My number 3 team is Boston. Boston looked like they were going to be a big loser in this offseason, and they managed to get some things right. You still have Tatum. Maybe Hayward will be better next season. We talked about that a little bit over the past few weeks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to bank on it yet, but I think he will be better. Let me say that. I don't think that – I'm not sure that he'll be to the form that he was before in Utah. Yeah. But I think that he'll be good enough to get starter minutes or to get really good minutes off the bench. Jaylen Brown's three-point percentage dropped this season, and I think that was a little bit – I think that he'll raise his three-point shooting up. I thought that this was a little bit of a down season based off of kind of a change of role for him, the change of chemistry with them, and I just think that losing Kyrie makes him a different player. Kemba Walker, as you said, I think that he's a better teammate. I don't even have a problem with Kyrie, as big of a problem, I should say, as most people do it with Kyrie as a teammate. But I think that Kemba Walker going in there eases a lot of tension. He's probably a little bit better off the ball, at least in that system. And I would say Kyrie's a good off-ball player with a guy like LeBron, but in that system, I think that Kemba Walker might be a little bit better. He's a better personality for that system. And I think that, as you said, his efficiency numbers will probably increase, I would imagine. Maybe a little bit of a better passer, too. We just haven't seen it because at least reflected in the assist numbers, because his talent hasn't been that of the talent that's been around Kyrie Irving. But I think that he's a quality team guy. And then you also have Enes Kanter, who they got for the cheap. So they have their center position. One guy I also want to give a mention of, I've mentioned him before, maybe for the partying reasons, but I do think Robert Williams has really good defensive potential and rebounding potential.
I agree with that.
And like he's an above the rim guy coming off the bench, so I think that they'll figure stuff out. The Celtics, I'm not too worried about this season. The 76ers are my number 2 team. I mean, I don't think that they got worse. They might have actually even got better. I like the Al Horford pick, although I do think it's a little weird because maybe you put him at the power forward position, but he's a little older, and I don't know if he's able to defend a lot of the modern day guys. Maybe he can, but at worst, he's coming off the bench for Joel Embiid, and that's awesome. I think that's a great fit for him. You still have Tobias Harris, so I think his role is going to be higher. I think he's going to be a higher priority guy this season than he was last year because Jimmy Butler is leaving. And Jimmy Butler was that third guy, and it just didn't seem like there was enough space for Tobias Harris in that offense. He was mostly a spot-up three-point shooter. I think that they could use him a little bit better this year, and I think that's exactly what will happen because they have really no other choice on the wing. Josh Richardson is another guy I know that I like him. I mean, anyone can defend, but I think that offensively he's a solid guy for them too.
3-and-D guy for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, I think both of them are extremely high potential guys. Joel Embiid has already actually kind of reached a lot of his potential in the paint. Didn't he average like 27 points a game this season? Ben Simmons still getting better.
Something like that.
He was really, really good. I have the 76. I don't think it's really close. I think that the number 1, number 2 are pretty easy. The Bucks are my number one. I mean, yeah, they lost Malcolm Brogdon. Yeah, they lost Mirotic, but I actually think that for as much as losing Brogdon hurts, and I know this is going to sound crazy because I'm a Mavs fan, I think Wesley Matthews was a good pickup for them. He was just a starter last season. He wasn't that great of a starter, but he was certainly someone who he could go off for some point. There were nights where he would go off for 30. I'm not expecting that for him night in, night out, but I think that him coming off the bench, he's a quality guy who can hit open threes, and I think that that's going to be his role there, 3 and D off the bench. And I think that was a good replacement, not a great replacement for Brogdon, but certainly a good,
cheap one for sure.
Yeah, kept a bunch of other players that had you going to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yep.
So that's my top 8 teams for the East. We can talk about that, or if you want, we can just go to the West.
The only thing I would say is I think my 2 through 5 are kind of fluctual.
Okay. Who was your 5 again?
Indiana all the way up to Boston. Because like you said, I could see Philly being better than Boston. I don't think that's crazy at all. Definitely could see Toronto being better than Boston. Definitely could see Indiana, creeping all the way up to the 3. And then, you mentioned the Nets even. To be honest, I didn't even take them into consideration. So I definitely could see them going anywhere from 6 to 8. But I think Kyrie and that team have to figure it out. Maybe not relatively quickly because the East is much weaker at the bottom, obviously. Mm-hmm. But relatively quickly.
I'll say this because I did mention this earlier, and I don't know if I'll get to it later, so I'm going to get to it right now. The Knicks, I could see them as an 8 seed, and this is my reason. I think that they have, for as much of funny offseason as they had, I think that their starting lineup is capable of actually being a little bit better than anticipated. You and I are both big Mitchell Robinson guys. And I think that in season 2, he might actually be a better offensive player. His defense was already among some of the best in the league, at least at shot blocking. Yep. And I think that his rebounding, he's going to be able to dominate the paint, at least on defense. Offensively, I think that he could get there, or at least make strides this season. Julius Randle was already a 21 points per game guy. And so is he a star? I don't think he's a star necessarily. Maybe in the East he could be a star. But he, at the very least, he's shown that he has really good offense. Not great offense, but really good offense, and he could be a 20-plus points per game guy. Kevin Knox is someone that you and I have both talked about. We both like him. His shooting stroke, I think, is solid. He had a rough percentage, for field goal percentage and three-point percentage in his rookie season, but he's a rookie. I don't really expect you to be great in your rookie season, especially on the Knicks.
Exactly.
But year 2, he's still a 6'8" small forward who's an athletic guy. He can create his own shot, and I think that everything that I've seen of him shows that he's a hard worker. In his time of being kind of supposedly a raw player who might not be ready in his freshman season at Kentucky to going into Kentucky and being ready in his freshman season, and everything that he does, everything that I see from him shows that he has a tough mentality. RJ Barrett. Actually, I think that he could be pretty NBA ready. And then Dennis Smith Jr., I know you don't like him all that much, but I do think that Dennis Smith Jr. is capable of growing in his 3rd season, especially in New York. I don't think that he was a fit at all in Dallas. Once Luka got there, I don't even really think he was that good of a fit in his rookie season, but the Mavs really had no other choice, and the reason they had to draft him was because he was, the highest potential guy. He was the highest talent guy at that spot, but not a fit in Dallas. I think he's a better fit in New York. And so that starting lineup, plus they got a few bench guys in this offseason, I don't think that it lived up to the expectations, but I do think that that's a team that could be in the running for an 8 or maybe even 7 seed. And then the other team that I have to look out for as a potential, bottom seed team is the Hawks. I'm not putting them there just yet because I don't think that they're quite ready. I think they're still a little young, but they did get enough talent to where I think that you could at least put them in consideration. But ultimately, I'm still sticking with Detroit. I think that Blake Griffin is better than anybody on both of those teams that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Andre Drummond is just as good as any center on either of those teams. And Derrick Rose, Reggie Jackson, and the rest of the guys on that team, I think, are solid. So that's my final thought on the Eastern Conference. Those are my sleeper teams, if you will.
Okay.
Like, we could move. Yeah, we can move to the West if you want, because I think this is going to be really fun.
Yeah, you go ahead and start with the West.
Okay, so my number 18 is the Kings. You and I both I might give you a little bit of an edge on being higher on the Kings because at least you watched them more than I did probably. But I do really like De'Aaron Fox. He went from a pretty good rookie to a really solid sophomore, and I think that he's only going to go higher from that point. He's improved both seasons that he's played. You also have Buddy Hield, who's gotten better each season that he's played. Marvin Bagley, I think Marvin Bagley had a really good rookie season, but I think that he's going to get better as well. There's something about that rookie season that, that's your first season. I'm not expecting him to be that good, and he was a 14 points a game guy coming out of college. He was taken above Luka, and he was taken above Luka for a reason. It was because he has offensive abilities that are actually, he has high potential on that end. He could shoot the three. He could, handle the ball actually pretty impressively. On the post, he positions himself really well, and he gets a decent amount of offensive rebounds. At least he did in college, and I think that in his second season, he's capable of doing that too. You had guys like Dwayne Dedmon, Harrison Barnes. Don't love the contract, but he's a solid player on that team, fourth option, and we've seen him as a fourth option before. It worked out in Golden State, but I'm not saying that this team's supposed to be Golden State. Trevor Ariza, I liked that pickup personally because he's coming off the bench. Yep. And there were a few other guys that I think that make them a playoff team this season. So they're my number 8. My number 7, I have the Spurs. The Spurs are – no one's really talking about them. Some people even might have them as an odd man out of the West. And I see it a little different. I actually think they got a little bit better this offseason. So DeJounte Murray is coming back. Derek White was already good for them off the bench. They got Marcus Morris. They brought back Rudy Gay. LaMarcus Aldridge is still there, and DeMar DeRozan is still there. Pop is still there. I mean, they have the depth that they had last season. They have the core of the guys that they had last season. And then you bring in guys like Marcus Morris and the return of DeJounte Murray, who was supposed to be your starter last season. Derek White comes off the bench. I mean, to me, that's a really, really good team. No one's really talking about them. Before the Lakers got Anthony Davis and before the Clippers got Kawhi Leonard and all them, when we were talking about them being the West being completely wide open, I would have gone as far as to say the Spurs, depending on matchups, may have been a team that could have went to the Western Conference Finals and even won. Now, of course, Anthony Davis is on the Lakers, and the Clippers have a really good 1-2 punch. So I'm not going to go as far as to say that anymore. But the Spurs are still a team that could win around 50 games. My number 6, the Warriors. I don't know that I could even say that the Spurs would be better than them, but I'm going to stick with the Warriors. Steph Curry is still there. D'Angelo Russell, we say that he's not a fit, but I'm not quite certain of that yet. We've seen him as a ball-dominant guy because he's had to be a ball-dominant guy. But you put him into the Warriors system, and I think that you might see a little bit of a change. There's something about that culture and there's something about that team that they're like the Spurs. The Spurs have had guys come in who were one way before who adapted the new system. And I think that D'Angelo Russell, we could see that happen with him. And then we talk about when the Warriors get Klay Thompson back, maybe in February, March, April. I think that that's going to be a championship caliber team. And at 6, that's actually going to be pretty fun if they are number 6, because they could surprise my number 3 seed and maybe even surprise going to the Western Conference Finals or even the championship. Who knows? But they have a lot of the same guys. Draymond Green's still there. Kevin Looney's still there. Willie Cauley-Stein, for as much as I didn't love him as a starter, he's actually a pretty good backup. I think that the Warriors are my number 6 team. I've got the Rockets at number 5. Their team really hasn't changed at all. They're getting a little bit older, so I'm not having them in the top 4, but James Harden is still James Harden. That offense is still going to get you a bunch of wins in the regular season. The postseason is really the only question that they have.
Exactly.
And the chemistry is also the question that they're going to have because we don't know what's going on in that locker room. But I'm assuming that they'll work things out. I'm going to go off of the assumption that, they still are able to put something together similar to what they were able to do the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And I do think that they'll work something out. Chris Paul and James Harden are both veterans.
Yeah.
I think that they'll work something out. And that's my number 5 team. Number 4, I've got the Jazz. I was debating on having them as high as number 2, but there's just so much to love in the Western Conference. I have them as number 4.
It's
good. I mean, you have Bogdanovich, who was just averaging 18 points a game on 2.5% or something like that, 3-point shooting.
Yep.
He's coming to the Jazz. You still have Ingles. You still have, Rudy Gobert actually surprisingly had. I shouldn't say surprisingly because he was never a bum offensively, but he averaged, I think, 16, 17 points a game. Let me check that real quick. But Donovan Mitchell is coming into his 3rd season, and I think that, we saw some growth for him the 2nd season, but I think that this will be even better. It was 16 points a game, 13 rebounds for Rudy Gobert. And then Mike Conley ultimately adds a lot to that team, but the only reason I don't have them number 3 is because my number 3 team is the Denver Nuggets.
Dude, I think literally ours from 6 up are going to be the same. Go ahead.
The Nuggets. So Jokic, I think Embiid when healthy is better than Jokic, but I do think that Jokic I've said this about a number of players, but Jokic falls into this category. Jokic is someone who has improved every single season. His numbers for scoring have gone up. He just averaged 20 points a game. The rebounding numbers have gone up. He's assisting around 8 assists per game.
Yeah.
And he was a dark horse MVP candidate last season. This season, I actually think that he could be a legitimate MVP candidate. Jamal Murray is another guy who's been improving every season. He's still young, and this is going to be his 4th season. I think that he's going to only get better. Gary Harris is someone that's not talked about, but he's a solid role player on that team. Paul Millsap is coming back. Michael Porter Jr. is coming back. Bull might actually even play. Michael Porter Jr. is a huge player for them.
Is huge.
And we don't know what his injuries are going to be like, but even if he just comes in and plays even just half the season, honestly, that gives them a bunch of wins. And the reason I say that is because they didn't lose any of the players that they just got Jeremy Grant from Oklahoma City. So
yeah, exactly.
The Nuggets continue to add, and they do it in kind of under the radar, sneaky ways. So I have them as my number 3. They're a deep team, really good offensively. I just still have them just a hair above the Jazz, although the Jazz had a phenomenal offseason. Yeah. Number 2, Hayden, I think you're going to love me. The Clippers are my number 2.
We have literally the same from 6 up.
Dang, yeah. So I thought I really, really wanted to put the Clippers as my number 1. I really did. And playoffs, it might actually be different. So the funny thing about this, I'll go ahead and say it. My number 1 is the Lakers. But in the playoffs, it's going to be interesting because if those 2 teams are number 1 and 2, there is no home court advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it can really go either way. I think that the teams are close to, at least in terms of who's going to get the most minutes, they're close to the same as far as talent goes, but it's just in different spots. So the defensive potential of the Clippers is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. With
Patrick Beverley, Kawhi Leonard, and Paul George. So
that's the best defensive backcourt.
Yes.
I would go as far to say maybe ever.
Yeah, that's a really. Kawhi Leonard, wasn't he all NBA? He was definitely all NBA 1st or 2nd team.
Yeah.
Paul George was in the Defensive Player of the Year running.
Yep.
I think Patrick Beverley might have gotten a defensive award this season. They're all award winners on defense. Lou Williams is not going to maybe he'll start, but he'll definitely get the bulk of those shooting guard minutes.
Yeah.
And I know I've seen a lot of the things that you liked on Twitter and all the things that you retweet. Montrezl Harrell is a pretty good player. Last season he averaged, I think, 16 points a game as one of the guys.
Hey, we'll get to that.
I'm not saying that he's going to be capable of defending Anthony Davis and all that, I would if I actually were the Clippers, I would put Paul George on Anthony Davis, and I'd put Montrezl Harrell on someone like Boogie Cousins or someone like that. Uh,
Yeah, I was just gonna. Yep.
but I think that that's a really good team, and their depth is pretty good, especially with the with Lou Williams potentially coming off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
But the depth, it's not good enough just yet, and that's why I have the Lakers as my number one team. Because the Lakers, we were wondering about what's their depth going to look like if they get Kawhi Leonard. That's what I had some friends, one friend particularly, who had the Lakers as a 6 seed with Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James. I thought that was absurd, but his reason was, well, their depth. Well, now we look at the Lakers, and you have Alex Caruso coming off the bench. If LeBron is starting at point guard, like I got an update for earlier, then Rajon Rondo is coming off the bench. Quinn Cook's coming off the bench. Avery Bradley's coming off the bench. Kyle Kuzma might come off the bench, and if he's not coming off the bench, then you have DeMarcus Cousins coming off the bench. You have a lot of really good players coming off the bench for the Lakers. I probably even missed a few of the guys. They're not going to be as good defensively, in my opinion, as the Clippers.
Yeah.
But I think regular season-wise, the depth that they have is going to be suitable for them as a number one overall seed. Playoffs is when it becomes a little bit different because, as I said in maybe a few podcasts ago, you lean a little bit less on your depth. You still need depth in the playoffs, but you lean a little bit less on it and give it to your main guys.
Yep.
And so that's when I think that the Clippers could actually become a little bit more of a threat if they stay healthy all season against the Lakers. Is if they don't have depth, they still have enough of it to where they could play their best players most of the minutes. Have guys coming off the bench who are pretty solid. Is it Zubac?
Yeah.
That's what they have.
Yeah.
Lakers fans liked him a few seasons ago, right?
Yeah. Even I mean, he was, another guy that, they didn't really want to give up.
Yeah.
Let me, or I'll get to that when I get to mine. But yeah, Zubac, he's again, matching up on Boogie or AD is different, but offensively for sure, off the bench, he does a lot of good things really well. And he's young, so he's only getting better. So I agree.
I also forgot to mention, they got JaMychal Green, the Clippers. They got who was it? They still have Wilson Chandler, who's pretty solid as a second or third guy. Landry Shamet was another one who I forgot. But they have a good team. I just think that the Lakers have a little bit more impressive depth, and that's the reason why I have them as my number one. Excuse me. But yeah, we can go to yours. I think I've talked a lot, but it sounds like we agree on a lot.
Number 8, I literally could not decide between two teams. I could not decide between two teams. And I think you'll be fairly happy considering how crappy of an offseason they had. I have number 8. It's split between the Mavs and the Trailblazers.
Okay.
Again, most everyone listening knows that LeBron is my boy. But when he retires, I've said on here many times, Luka is that's Luka's my guy at that point. So I think, he did that as a rookie, which is, I think you could even make the argument he had a better rookie season than LeBron did, statistically at least, and definitely shooting the ball. So, you add him, he's continuing to grow, he's going to continue to get better. Kristaps is coming in. Hopefully, Seth Curry can kind of continue to find that underrated type of Curry chip on his shoulder. But also at the same time, the Blazers were the 4 seed last year?
Yeah.
So also at the same time, it was kind of hard for me to drop them all the way out. But also at the same time, I think there's going to be That number 8 and number 7 spot are going to be so tightly contested in the West. It's going to be so much fun. So much fun. And even as you go up, it's just going to be fantastic, intense basketball, hopefully every night. So I'm kind of split back and forth between the Mavs and the Blazers. But also at the same time, like I said, I could see like three or four other teams sneaking into that 8 spot over them. So that's why I kind of left it almost blank. But at the moment, I have the Mavs or the Blazers, which is kind of cheating. But I couldn't figure it out. Sat for like an hour I went back and forth. So I just stuck them both in there. I think like we talked about, it's fluctuating. Mm-hmm. At 7, I have the Kings. Again, I think you mentioned it slightly. I'm probably a little higher on them than maybe even most people are. But I just think, again, we talked about this maybe off air. I got League Pass specifically so I could watch them play basketball. It was so much fun to watch them, how fast and how intense they played. Give me a sec. Come here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the Kings, their starting lineup is impressive. So this is what the starting lineup is going to look like, in my opinion. You got De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, Marvin Bagley, and then Dwayne Dedmon. All of them can shoot threes, so that's a fit in today's NBA.
Yeah.
They just got. I mean, Yogi Ferrell was someone who no one talked about him last season, but he's been a guy who's actually been pretty reliable off the bench, at least up until he came to the Kings, where he wasn't actually getting that many minutes. He did shoot relatively well from 3. He shot 36%, which isn't phenomenal, but it's certainly good enough for someone coming off the bench, and about 43.5% field goal percentage. So I mean, he's someone they have enough guys off the bench to where I think that they'll be able to rest their starters in key minutes of the game, and then bring their starters back, I should say, in key minutes of the game. And they're young.
Yeah.
They're really talented, and I agree. I really like that team.
Yeah. And then, basically all the reasons you just mentioned. They play fast. They're going to score a lot of points. They brought in veteran guys to kind of also, even if they don't play a whole lot, at least kind of start to direct the younger guys, in the right direction. At 6, just like you, I have the Warriors. Steph is Steph. Everything that we've mentioned about him before applies here. He's absolutely the greatest shooter ever. Then you add in D'Lo, who potentially could be decent off the ball. I actually think the fit is not – I still think it's awkward, but I don't think it's as awkward to where, there are people like saying the Warriors want him to make the playoffs. First off, they would make the playoffs just based off of Steph and Draymond alone, in my opinion. Plus, like you said, Kevin Looney, they added Willie Cauley-Stein, who was a decent part of that Kings team last year. He's a good rim runner. He's a decent shot blocker. I have them at 6. I think it's blasphemous that – go ahead.
So I do want to add, we talk about D'Angelo Russell maybe even needing to play better off the ball, but one thing that I think that we need to maybe highlight that some people aren't thinking about is one thing that we were raving about all offseason, or not all offseason, all playoffs, was how great Steph Curry is off the ball. He's someone who if he doesn't have the ball in his hands, he's not waiting around the perimeter like someone like Jason Tatum or Kyrie Irving, and that was the Celtics' problem. He's always moving. And so D'Angelo Russell, for as much of, maybe he makes some dumb decisions off the court, he's actually not a stupid passer.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I think that might be something that we see a little bit more of this season is with the ball in Russell's hands, the amount of movement that Curry has could lead to a lot of open threes for him. And then I don't know how it'll fit with Russell coming off the ball. We'll have to see. But I think it'll be at least good enough. He's at least talented enough to make that team a playoff team and keep them afloat.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah. At 5, I have the Rockets. They didn't add anyone. If anything, I would argue they got worse just because, like you said, they're older. They have the whole chemistry issues. But also at the same time, we're talking about James Harden, who in the regular season, knows how to put the ball in the basket. They still have Clint Capella there. Chris Paul is at the very least an average point guard. When healthy, I would say he's definitely above average, at least defensively even. I still think he can shoot okay. So yeah, in the regular season, I could see them, putting up good enough numbers to get that 5 or 6 type range, maybe 4, but I think those top 4 are probably pretty set, at least in my opinion. At 4, I have the Jazz. Obviously, they added my boy Michael Conley. Donovan Mitchell, still young, continuing to get better. Hopefully, we see his efficiency go up now that they have other guys that can create their own shot and score. Like you said, that's just it's gonna be a good team. Because not only do they play, they're always going to be good defensively. That's just part of their culture. And, obviously they have Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley's a very, very smart defender. So they're going to be good defensively. They've just been missing the offensive punch outside of Donovan Mitchell. And now they added Mike Conley. They added Bogdanovich. So I think that puts them into that top 4. At 3, I have Denver. All the reasons you said. Jokic, I think it's going to be an MVP candidate. Michael Porter Jr. hopefully is coming back. Even if he's only 75 or 85%, I still think, like you said, they didn't lose anyone. That's just adding another talent. Wing was really their weakest point. So even if he's, not the number 1 pick that everyone thought he was going to be a few years ago, I still think he has the 3-and-D potential. He's long. He can shoot. Jamal Murray, I hope, is going to continue getting better. Gary Harris, good, solid role guy. Paul Millsap's back. It's just they're very, very deep, like you said, very, very deep.
Michael Porter Jr. can also create his own shot, even, which is very big when it comes to, you have Jamal Murray, who can create his own shot, and he's kind of been their go-to guy in the last minutes because he can do that. But now adding Michael Porter Jr., as a second guy, you have to take that into consideration when it comes into the fourth quarter. You have to be able to guard both. So sorry, continue, but
no, you're good. I agree 1,000%. Great points. Very deep, like you said, but I just don't. Any other season, I probably would put them at the very top of their conference. But Obviously, at 2, I have the Clippers. Like we talked about, everything we talked about, the defensive potential, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, that sort of duo. They're going to have Shamet. They're going to have Lou Williams off the bench. I will say this. Montrezl Harrell is a pretty good player. But, there's a lot of people that are trying to say that he has Dennis Rodman type defensive potential. I don't know if you've seen that picture going around of the Clippers starting 5, and above it is the Bulls starting 5. I just thought that was really funny. The 96, 97 Bulls. You have Kawhi and Paul George, who are the MJ and Scottie Pippen, and then all the other role guys. But I actually like Montrezl Harrell. I don't want to see him get destroyed, but guys, come on. We're talking about Anthony Davis. Like, talent-wise, that is the best teammate LeBron has ever had, talent-wise. He's going into the prime of his career. He's only 26, right? 26?
Anthony Davis?
Yeah.
That sounds about right. I think he's 26.
Yeah.
I think Montrezl Harrell is 25.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, people are like, oh, Zubac off the bench can stop Anthony Davis. He's like this thin. He looks like a stick. I like Zubac, but I mean, I think definitely those front 3 defensively, fantastic. Like you talked about, even putting Kawhi or Paul George on AD. I don't know how much I would. Well, I guess you put Paul George on AD because I think you want Kawhi on LeBron. Just because I think LeBron is still just too strong for Paul George to be guarding him for an entire game, for an entire series. Paul George is a great defender. I just think LeBron is so upper body and lower body strong that you need someone that's not only quick enough to stay in front of him, but also strong enough to keep him from doing whatever he wants. And obviously, Kawhi has proved that out of anyone outside of maybe Iggy when he's healthy, Kawhi and Iggy are probably the best 2 that you want guarding LeBron. So I have the Clippers at 2, and at 1 I have the Lakers. A lot of people were talking about that, it was over for the Lakers when Kawhi didn't choose them. And I would have agreed if we would have had the same role players as last year. But I will say this about Pelinka. He has done a really good job of bringing in a lot of depth and a lot of good, solid role guys. And shooters, which is something that they didn't really have last year. You want to surround LeBron with shooters. And then you add in the fact that Kuz is still there. Hopefully, I keep seeing reports that he's been working really hard on trying to be more of a consistent shooter. So hopefully the work he's putting in pays off. And I still think the tandem of LeBron and Anthony Davis is just a little bit better than the tandem of Kawhi and Paul George. But I could be biased. So
I completely forgot to say this about the Lakers, but I mentioned, the guys like Avery Bradley, Quinn Cook, Alex Caruso, Rajon Rondo, maybe JaVale McGee. I forgot to mention the biggest outside guy that they brought in this offseason was Danny Green, who addresses that 3-point shooting that that we've been talking about all off season that they need. And so,
And let me ask you a question.
yeah,
Who was on the championship team with Kawhi last year? Was Danny Green on that team?
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Also, he was on that. Was he on that championship team with the
Yes, with the Spurs. Yes.
Spurs? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But they were a great duo. I actually am going to kind of miss seeing them together, but he makes them better. But the thing about this Western Conference, actually both of the conferences, I love personally that Kawhi Leonard went to the Clippers because one, as it's been said by multiple people, the Clippers-Lakers rivalry is finally legitimate.
Oh yeah.
So every single game of the year in Los Angeles is going to be
Fantastic.
fun. It's going to be competitive, and you're going to have. It's these games are all going to be big, and now you have, I think, actually relatively good balance. Yeah, sure, the Lakers should be the favorite, and the Clippers should, if you want to call them a favorite, they deserve it. You have teams that deserve to be the favorite, but I have a list of contenders that I split them into three groups. You got the favorites, you've got the just below favorites but still notable contenders, and then you have like the bottom tier. They have a shot, but they are a little bit of a reach, but they can do it. I'm going to say the Lakers, Clippers, and Bucks are the favorites. I think that if you argued of any of them as favorites, I completely agree. 76ers, Warriors, and the Nuggets are all that second tier of teams that I don't think they should be favorites, but if they made it to the championship, it would surprise me just a little bit, but it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah.
The teams that I think might actually have a puncher's chance, I'm not gonna. It would actually shock me a little bit, but I could just see it just a little bit. Are the Rockets and the Jazz? I don't think that it's going to happen, but if the Rockets return to what they were 2 seasons ago, which I think is certainly possible, they have a shot. And the Jazz, we don't know what they're going to look like, but they added enough pieces this offseason.
Exactly.
They have. I mean, I have to put them in that conversation at least. We don't have to take them as seriously as the Lakers, obviously, but that's 8 teams right there. That's over 25% of the league that really has a shot at making it to the finals. And I think that this is going to be such a fun NBA season, such a fun playoffs, especially in the West. I mean, I'll tell you from my Western Conference, Lakers 1, Kings 8. I think the Lakers probably easily win that, but it could go to 6 or so. Clippers and Spurs, that could actually be a pretty fun series. I think the Clippers would take that.
I would love for Kawhi to play.
Yeah,
against
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, Nuggets Warriors, that could be a Warriors upset.
Yeah,
that'd be phenomenal.
1,000%.
And then Jazz Rockets, I don't know. I honestly couldn't pick right now. Actually, no, I'd probably say the Jazz, but
I'd probably
realistically
go
both.
Yeah, exactly.
It just could really honestly depend on who is better on one night. You know. And so, I mean, most of those series, those are all competitive series in my opinion.
That's what we want. That's what we want in basketball. That's what we want in basketball.
It's just fun. And then the season after, you have the Nets potentially as a contender.
Exactly.
That's 9. I mean, this is great. I'm so happy about the outcomes of this offseason, except for my Dallas Mavericks. But we'll talk about that. Actually, do you have anything to say about your thoughts on the overall playoffs?
I'm just very excited. I'm very excited.
I'm really excited. I will say Western Conference. You mentioned Blazers, Mavericks. I would say this. I'm disappointed in the Mavericks, but I personally would take the Blazers. Or I would take the Mavericks just a notch over the Blazers.
I would too.
Only because I think that the Blazers lost a crap ton. And I think that the Mavs, at least, while their additions were a little underwhelming, they at least added enough players to where they have role guys.
Essentially, I mean, Kristaps didn't play at all last year.
Yeah.
So,
So I think that, I don't know. We'll talk about that now, actually. We're going to do a losers and winners of free agency. We could start with the losers. I think that I like to end